Hi, everyone. Welcome to White Wine, the space where we unpack challenging conversations, share perspectives, and hopefully grow together. I'm your host, Bianca van Wyk, and my co host is Linda,
Hello.
Dihn,
Hello.
and we are so glad you're here. Today, we're tackling a big one. What is racism? So, it's a term that's often misunderstood, it's misused, often oversimplified. But it has a profound impact on our societies and also on our individual lives. In this episode, we'll break it down what racism is, how it shows up in different ways, and why it's so important to understand it deeply. This is obviously a safe space, and we're here for curiosity, for learning. So, whether you're here to broaden your understanding or you're just curious about the topic, welcome. Make sure you grab a cup of coffee or your favorite drink, hit the like button, and let's dive in. Then I am going to open the floor to you.
Okay. So when we talk about racism, specifically in a South African context, people like to pick and choose the between the dictionary uh, definition versus the practical world application of systemic racism and how it affects others. The dictionary definition has actually been amended to account for that. Did you guys know that?
No.
If we look up racism simply on a web browser, hit enter, right?
Okay.
Okay, fine. I have a weird search history, so we'll just say define racism. Okay.
Maybe you should clarify that before people that are watching really wonder what that
Yeah.
weird means.
And we actually found out that the dictionary definition or the textbook definition changed the last time Dihn and I were in a conversation. So we actually found
Yes.
that out together. We were both pleasantly surprised, but I feel that those words still need explaining to people. So
I feel you are right. I feel you are absolutely right. When we define racism, prejudice or discrimination or antagonism by an individual, community, or institution against a person or people on the basis of their membership of a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. They
Okay.
added that or marginalized.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Huh.
And
and
that
it,
is the
it's very
Oxford's
relevant.
definition.
But the word marginal, it's so relevant because in South Africa, we are the minority
Exactly.
in
And when we say
numbers.
we mean white people.
Yeah, okay. Us. Um, but the minority in numbers.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean we don't have, yes, as there goes my English. We are the
Power.
minority in numbers, but it doesn't mean we don't have the power. Because of our history and because of the inequality in this country, we as white people systemically still have the power. But now, some people are going to need help with the explanation of that.
Talking about structural racism involves um, a whole bunch of things, but it's important pillars to make life not easy to survive, but not unbearable. All right. And I think when we're talking to people like us, they feel like we discuss privilege like it's, oh, I have fancy cars and an easy life, but it's actually really just the bare minimum. It's the bare minimums of things. It's there's economic disparities. White South Africans, despite being a minority, continue to hold disproportionate economic power due to generational wealth accrued during apartheid. Land inequality. Land ownership remains racially skewed. As much as they like to deny it, it does. With the majority of arable land, arable being the key word there, with the majority of arable land owned by white individuals. Access to services, disparities in education, healthcare, and housing persist to date, disproportionately affecting Black and colored South Africans. I had
Okay.
a parent ask me about my child's school. My child attends online school, and this parent straight-faced asked me in this year how Black this online school is.
Okay, so I think when people when we ask what or when we say what is racism, people tend to think it's using the K word, it's being outwardly hateful.
Yeah, and that's a
But then
crumb.
they feel
That is a
comfortable
crumb.
enough, but then they feel comfortable enough to ask about the school, about the online school,
Exactly.
about the integration of that school. So when we say racism, it's a systemic issue, this is what we are talking about. It's so ingrained that some people don't even realize that what they are doing or saying is racist. That's why you get
Yes.
different types of racism. You get overt racism and you get covert racism. And a lot of the times the people that we interact with, especially on social media, will be like, oh, I'm not racist. I have Black friends. But they don't realize that the way we grew up and these structural and systemic issues is so ingrained that we might even have thoughts or internal biases that we don't realize is also racist.
Okay, which brings me to the next question.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think what I find is a lot of people misunderstand the difference between, well, first of all, racism is a form of prejudice, but people seem to confuse racism and prejudice. When they are experiencing prejudice, they say they are experiencing racism. So like, for instance, on my page, which is the anti-racism page, my social media pages, is I'll get a lot of white people that will tell me as a white woman that I am being racist towards them. Okay. What? Yeah.
Same.
What they are experiencing, most likely, and I'm willing to admit that, is that I am being prejudicial towards them because I don't like their views. Okay. So I can admit that there are occasions where I am definitely prejudiced, where if you've got a certain view, I put you in a certain box. And
I'm very judgmental.
yeah, well,
I'm out a little bit. There's a massive, massive difference between I think you're a doers because you dehumanize people versus I'm getting really excited about maybe offing one of these people. Hey,
yeah, but
big
prejudice
difference
is not
there.
offing someone.
We read that. We read that in that Facebook post,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
There's a massive gap between the two.
You see, but now people think that being hateful and threatening lives and using the K word is racist. Yes, it's racist, but there are other forms of racism. So when you ask how integrated a certain school is, online or not, that is racist. Why don't you want to be in in an integrated school? Why do you still want to be separate?
Yeah, but
Why do
can we
you
assume that this person doesn't want their child in an
Yes,
integrated school? Oh,
yes.
were they explicit about that?
Oh yeah, no.
Um,
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
so
I
listen.
also would ask, is the school integrated? Because if it's not integrated, I wouldn't want my child in there because the world is integrated. So,
You know,
but
he
this
was
person,
one of the parents from like a previous online school that I was
okay.
in, and I found this school and I sent a message on the class group because that school was so bad. It's like now been named in a scam, like
Mm,
it's bad.
mm.
And I sent the message to the class group going, "Hey, I actually found something better. Come here." And he was like, "How black is the school?"
Okay.
He lives in his fucking car,
Uh,
right? He's a piece of
it's
shit,
the same.
really.
It's
But
just
okay,
okay.
moving
It's
on.
the same as when a white woman walks in the street and she clutches her bag at the sight
Mm,
of a person of color.
yeah,
Now that act in itself is not racist. However, it
it's
is
prejudicial.
racist if you don't do it. No, it's racist if you
Racist.
don't do it for a white man.
Yeah.
If you clutch your bag because you are stressful, fine. But if you only do it towards people of color, that is racist. You didn't use the K
Mhm.
word, but you were being racist.
Also,
And this comes back to the people hating on Bianca for talking about white criminals. Bianca, how
yes.
dare you?
But
Um,
this is
because
also what
if
I've been
you
asking them is outside of feeling offended, how does this affect your life? Because racism will affect people's lives.
but
So
what I want to
outside of
say
your hurt fifis, how does it affect you? And they never
But
have
what
an
I want to
answer.
say about that and the defending white criminals is if you do it purely because they are white, you are racist. If you cannot believe that a white person committed a crime, you are racist. Um, but I want to highlight this over and over and over again because so many people will say that they are not racist. I recently had an interaction with um, two people on a African American woman's post about South Africa and apartheid, and the one guy was like, "You can't talk about all white people like that because she said white people are innately racist." And he said, you can't do that because some of us are trying. And then he also said he's married to a black South African woman. And I'm like,
Oh.
so it doesn't even matter if you are um, friends with people of color or married to a person of color, you can still be racist. That proximity to people of color doesn't exempt you from being racist. So what I want to say about that is people are quick to say that they are not racist because they are either in a biracial relationship or they, we all love the saying, I've got black friends. But they don't realize that racism includes that internal bias, that grabbing of the bag for a person of color, but not a white person, that asking how integrated the school is, that things that we think is normal, like a
Mm.
normal thought, you
Mm.
would think it's normal, is racist. But if
I
people don't understand what racism is, they're not going to do anything about it.
I think we must, there are a few things that we must realize is that you get implicit racism and explicit racism. And what we're talking about now is actually implicit racism. So it's linked to unconscious biases and your stereotypes or your discriminatory behavior. Like, for instance, the assumption in the workplace that, for instance, a black colleague is less qualified until they prove themselves. I have seen that so often. Okay. Or educational bias. So, where teachers unconsciously call on students of a certain race more often or have lower expectations of for students that are not, for instance, white. Okay.
Mm.
Guidance counselors that steer their students to certain professions and advanced courses or different universities Customer service. Good example is how store employees will probably follow customers that of a certain racial background more closely because they are assuming that they are more likely to shoplift. Waiting longer to serve someone at a restaurant based on their race. And I've also seen that. Okay.
I've seen that. I've worked with
Healthcare
them.
disparities is something. So it impacts, like for instance, with healthcare, a doctor unconsciously underestimating the pain levels of, for instance, Black women and Black men. And that is, I mean, that's documented and that's has a impact on people's lives. Then there is also the assuming that a patient's health behaviors are inherently tied to their race, rather than addressing like socioeconomic factors. And then there's, of course, your everyday microaggressions, which is your saying something like, "You're so articulate."
You
To
speak
someone,
English so well.
exactly. And what we're doing is we're implying surprise because of eloquence. It's weird. Or touching someone's hair without their permission and justifying it as, oh, I just want to feel it. It's just curiosity. It's not considering the racial undertone for that. Big thing that I address, and it's why my content is the type of content, is media representation. So, for instance, when you cast people of color primarily in movies or TV shows in a certain role, but also highlighting the race of a suspect in a news story. But when the suspect is white, all of a sudden you don't have a photo. You've got a photo of that Justice Hammer or Lady
Mm.
Justice. White
Let
criminals
me
don't look like that.
I get so fired up, right? When when there's a crime story and the media is so freaking guilty of this, of say a domestic violence incident of a person of color, right? Then they say word for word, this person is an abuser or whatever. When the person is white, then he had financial problems. Then he had
Emotional
mental health
strain.
issues,
Stress.
emotional stress.
But,
Then
but it's not
is the
only
topic of the article.
yeah, but it's not only the criminal. You know, I cover crime stories. Have you
Mm.
tried to look for personal information on a black victim or a colored victim where you want to tell your audience? So, Lebo enjoyed hiking. I can't tell them that. I can't tell them Lebo. At most, they will tell you how many children they have. They won't tell you where they worked. They won't tell you what they enjoyed. But then if I cover a story, for instance, the lady that was and her daughter that was shot in Hartenbeespoort last December, I've got her hobbies. I've got where she taught. I have got so
The
much on
names
her
of
and her
her
daughter.
dogs. You have the names of her dogs.
I've got everything on her, and that the issue is, and yes, I love it, yes, and provide me that, but you do not do it for black victims. The only reason I know about Maria Machatu's private life is because I've met her sons. I've been to her home,
Mm,
but there was not one article on this woman and what kind of woman she was. I had no
mm.
idea that she was a brave woman that broke away from her ex, took her kids, and she was sorting them out herself. I had no idea because there was an article that covered Maria. She's known to the people that, you know, she was the lady that got shot on the pig farm and they threw her body to it. But that's not who she was.
She
She
was
was,
no one.
and that's the thing. So the bias or the racism doesn't only go about the actual criminal, it goes about the victims. And
Yeah,
it's
I
terrible.
can tell you so much more about Riva Steenkamp than I can about Mandisa Kanyile.
Yes.
I can tell you what Riva did in high school, but all I can tell you about Mandisa Kanyile is that she went to collect a parcel from the post office.
There you go.
And
And
that's sad.
So those are things, and we as white people need to recognize that there is something wrong with it. We
Yeah.
need to use our voices to change that because, in all honesty, I think people get very upset when you say, yeah, but white people own more resources, white people own land, because a lot of people can say, yeah, but that's not my case. I've got no generational wealth, and I actually don't have generational wealth. Okay, I just want to highlight that. But it does not mean that I did not benefit. I have got a theory. The fact that white people did not have to fight for survival has made us weak and lazy. Because
Soft.
when it comes to actually addressing things or trying to understand new concepts, or we seem to lag behind everyone else.
What what we both, all three of us, get on social media is is whataboutism, when white people are like, but what about reverse racism? Or what about when a person of color calls me this or that or names whatever? And to that, I always say, hurt feelings does not equal racism. If somebody calls you a name or what you want the world to believe is a slur, let me just say now it doesn't exist. You feeling offended does not mean you just experienced racism.
But the counter argument to that is, but if we call a black person a name, then they get offended. And
I think
so how do you get away with that kind of argument? Doesn't it sound unfair? For instance, how is it different if I call a black person a name, an animal name, for instance?
so. I think the word you're
But
referring to is mlungu, yeah?
No.
no, anything.
My
Cracker
question.
or no, okay,
Well,
so
if you
what
look
I
at
want to
it, like
say about
a
that,
slur for white people does not exist. I know they like to
okay, but
they
now
like to
Bianca
cite
is asking,
mlungu.
but
That's not
now
my
Bianca is
question.
asking if a white person calls a person of color a name that they might not like, how is that different? Now, the difference is what we've already discussed in this episode is the systemic issues that goes along with racism.
Okay.
Would you call a white person that same name?
No. I
Exactly.
don't think people
That
would.
is why
Yeah.
it is racist. So,
For instance, white
us,
people are never likened to apes, for instance.
no. We are told we are blank Word documents. It's not the same.
Okay, so
Paper
let me
plates.
put it this way. Let me put it
Paper plane.
simply in one sentence. There is a difference between racism and prejudice. Prejudice is an individual bias or assumption about someone based on personal beliefs, whereas racism combines such biases with systemic power and structures to uphold that racial inequality.
Mhm.
That is the simple
So,
difference.
so the important thing, and that's what I wanted to get us to get to, is the power.
Mm.
The power.
Can white people experience racism?
No,
Thank you.
because of the power.
Can
The
I?
power dynamics do not allow it.
Okay,
We
but
can
can I tell you?
experience prejudice,
I'm
but
going
not
to.
racism.
I want to highlight here that for me, the conversation I think is very important to have. And I just wanted to highlight, though, is that a lot of these conversations are deflections from actually addressing actual power dynamics and making actual structural change. It's like you tiptoeing around white people's feelings the whole time, having the same conversation over and over again, and having to repeat yourself. And we're not moving to what really matters, and that is the power structures. And that, I think, is that we must always watch who is controlling the conversation and what why we are always addressing the feelings of white people, but not actually the lived experience of other people, Black people, colored people, Indian people in South Africa. Why are we not, and it's become this dance the whole time and deflection the entire time. And we need to get to a stage where the can white people experience racism conversation becomes irrelevant, you know,
Mm,
and where we
mm,
say, how does that change power structures and move it to that?
mm,
At a stage that needs to be the conversation. Because this conversation has been really well. We've I think we've only scratched the surface of
mm.
understanding what implicit racism is and its different forms. And it's tough, but it's a necessary topic, I think. And I hope this discussion gave everyone some food for thought. Thank you very much for joining us. That's me, Bianca. Thank you for your time.
Thank you,
Bye.
ladies. Good night,
You.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.